Okay. Okay, so our group is doing a presentation over Uber, and my group members are Cherish Pope, Manda Egbert, and myself, Grace Byrne. Our table of contents will consist of an overview and insights of Uber, with then moving on to the effects on employee outcomes, and finishing up with leadership efforts to address the culture. Uber was founded in 2009 by Garrett Camp and Travis Kalanick. When Uber was created, the concept was fresh. To be able to be able to get a ride in a clean vehicle with good service at the price of a typical taxi, all from the device in your hand, was unimaginable until Uber came around. The company was fast to grow. In just over a year, the app was developed and the first ride was given. After a year in the States, Uber expanded to Paris, where the idea was originally thought of. Uber's strength was derived from the fact that a need was found that traditional taxis had not been meeting. The company grew quickly because of its utilization of technology. Although successful, Uber has faced its fair share of challenges. Entrepreneurs and other businesses can learn from Uber's mistakes that it has faced within its short history. Uber generated more than 10.7 billion in global revenue from its rideshare segment in 2019. And as of March 2021, Uber remains at the top of the ride-hailing company in the United States, which accounted for 67% of the market share. If you want to go on to the next slide, yeah. The most important things a business needs in order to be successful in the long run are a goal, management, and people. Uber has these things, but has lacked the morality and positive culture that is also required for a successful company. One example of a toxic company culture is the deception of what was called a safe ride fee. The company said that the charge was needed to be able to properly train drivers, keep up with the maintenance on the vehicles, and run comprehensive background checks on all of the employees. However, according to the New York Times article, How Uber Got Lost, that information was proven to be deceptive, and it only added more margin for each purchase. Over time, court documents showed this. One employee even testified that the margins were only boosted because Uber claimed to have safer rides, when the safety training in actuality only consisted of one short video. This shows the lack of effective management of the employees within the company. The article also states that Mr. Kalanick required an almost hypnotic level of obedience from his staff in order to build the company that he wanted. The CEO wanted what's known as founder worship, which is an aggressive approach and leads companies to breaking the rules. This is seen from an entrepreneur who won't stop at anything and do anything until the company has reached its very best. The company's CEO wanted to expand, and as a way to accomplish this, Mr. Kalanick gave a lot of power to the mid-level management employees. This sounds better than having to micromanage each city that the company had a base in, but it ended up being more harmful than helpful. The lack of adequate financial management led to costly marketing campaigns and bribes to police officers. And this corner cutting is part of what made Uber grow at such a fast rate.
So Uber's values under Kalanick included things like customer obsession, big bold bets, champions mindset, always be hustling, principled confrontation, and most importantly, meritocracy and toe stepping. This aggressive culture bred a toxic work environment of sexual harassment, discrimination, and threats of violence. So in order to talk about and really show Uber's toxic culture, it's important to hear Susan Fowler's story And Fowler made a blog post in 2017 that painted a poor picture of Uber and the culture its values culminated. And this basically started when she was sexually harassed by her manager. And when she reported this to HR, they basically told her he was a one-time offender and they would just talk to him and basically nothing happened. And it gave her no choice but to leave her team so she wouldn't have to deal with this manager, even though she had significant expertise in what this team was working on. As her time with the company progressed, it was clear that this manager was not a one-time offender, as other female employees admitted that he also sexually harassed them. And they all got together to talk to HR about it. And HR basically lied on the manager's behalf and said that he was a one-time offender, even though he wasn't, which led Fowler and other female employees to give up on their managers in HR to look out for them. So to quote from her blog post, it seemed like every manager was fighting their peers and attempting to undermine their direct supervisor so that they could have their direct supervisor's job. She said that managers would try to earn favor with their supervisors and would tell their employees, like, oh, just wait in a quarter or two, I'm going to have my supervisor's job. One manager would even withhold business critical information from executives to earn favor with other executives. And Fowler's harrowing description of the highly political culture at Uber and its effects on employees, to quote, projects were abandoned left and right, OKRs were changed multiple times each quarter, nobody knew what our organizational priorities would be one day to the next, and very little ever got done. We all lived under fear that our teams would be dissolved, there would be another reorg, and we'd have to start on yet another new project with an impossible deadline. It was an organization in complete, unrelenting chaos. Although she and others liked their work and were able to achieve good performance, this toxic environment caused many talented engineers to transfer, leading Fowler to attempt the same. However, she was blocked from transferring due to unreported performance issues, despite never having received negative feedback. So she basically just waited for the next performance reviews, which, said that she had good performance. So a couple months later, she tried to transfer again, but she wasn't even just blocked this time, she was ineligible because her performance review was changed after the fact from positive to negative. And this was basically done because her staying at the company made her manager look good. That was the only reason why. And that had negative effects on her because she was in a graduate program at Stanford that Uber sponsored for high performers. But now that she wasn't a high performer, they wouldn't sponsor her anymore. And that was very stressful for her. And she continued to face harassment and sexist comments as the number of women engineers at Uber dwindled. When she started, it was around 25% women. And when she left, it was around 3%. She was threatened by her manager for reporting his supervisor, and was told if she ever did that again, she would be fired, which is illegal. But she fortunately found another job soon after and then left the company. So what does Fowler's story show in regards to organizational culture, leadership, and performance pertaining to Uber? So the toxic and political culture at Uber, it led to high amounts of job dissatisfaction, which increases rates of voluntary turnover. While Fowler was able to make success for herself, Uber blocking her from transferring kept her from being eligible for her graduate program just for management's personal gain. Uber's culture fostered by leadership made leadership unreliable for and even abusive towards employees, which led to stress and unhappiness. And this culture of meritocracy and competition led to distrust and lack of justice within the organization. And considering that job satisfaction and trust strongly correlate with organizational commitment, it is no wonder that the female engineers like Fowler, who are being targeted by managers, left the organization, taking their skills and diverse perspectives with them. Uber's mercenary culture was leading to its demise, a serious problem that could only be solved by a change in leadership and values.
So in 2017, about 8 years after he helped co-found the project, Kalanick was forced to step down by investors because of the years of scandals and harassment claims that pretty much went unchecked, untreated. And even the top competitor, Lyft, was unsurprised to see him go. And the CEO, John Zimmer, commented on the leave by basically just emphasizing the importance of values and ethics, essentially saying that he was unsurprised that they were a big factor in why he had to go. Just before Kalanick ended up leaving, they hired a new senior vice president to basically address the declining culture. She was Frances Frey, and she was a Harvard professor and administrator. And then later that year, Kaurajahi was hired as the CEO, and he was essentially attractive to investors because his personality was a direct opposite of Kalanick. He was more agreeable, he was comforting, he was a lot more friendly with people, and that was a big contrast to Kalanick, who was known for being very harsh and rigid. Kaurajahi began by downsizing the departments and ended up laying off over 1,000 employees due to budget cuts. And basically the top employees and managers had decided that they had way more employees than they could afford to, so they had to downsize a lot. So as far as steps taken to improve the culture, there was a lot of focus on how to increase safety, because safety was 100% overlooked whenever Kalanick was in charge. So one of the big things they did, one of the first things, I believe it was in 2019, is they used a tech company that used artificial intelligence to do surveillance. So they had cameras and microphones, and the videos would be stored by the tech company, and Uber could request it if there was an incident, and the drivers could also request it, but the faces would be blurred. But Uber did not have immediate access to those videos unless they had, if some incident, there was a precedent for them to have it. And the artificial intelligence that the cameras used detected if drivers were distracted, if they were looking away from the road, and it'd give them a notification to look back. And it would also detect crashes. So that was definitely a big step towards trying to be safe. And just having the videos, that's essentially adding a witness to any situations that would have just been based on the two people in the car discussing what happened. They also made it so that you could contact emergency services within the app. Not only was this very convenient, but it was it's good for if an emergency does happen, Uber is immediately aware and knows that something is going on, so they can check to make sure that things actually do happen, that emergency services do arrive, and that it works out. And the last thing is PIN numbers, the personal identification numbers that verify rides. These are good for quite a few reasons. It's not uncommon for large events to have a bunch of people trying to get Ubers to leave at the same time. So you have a bunch of different Uber drivers at the same place with different people that they're looking for. And so the PIN makes it really easy to identify whose car you're getting into, making sure that you're one, not getting into a fake car, and so you're somebody who's pretending to be a driver, and you're also not getting into the wrong driver's car, because it can be hard to use the pictures that come on the driver's profiles. So all of those were good safety procedures that helped feel both employees and customers feel a little bit better about what they were doing. And then an executive procedure that was implemented was a transparency report. It essentially outlined the number of harassment and safety incidents that had happened during rides. This was really important for Uber to be held accountable for the incidents that had happened, and definitely got backlash at first just because people did not understand the sheer number of things that had happened or gone on in rides. But this was a good step in the right direction to be honest about what had happened and to prove that numbers were going down, and they were actually doing something to stop it. So what else can be done? There's a lot of different things. One big thing is moving away from the rigid edge that Uber has, where the most important thing, the main point that the company has is to continue to grow and market domination. So stepping away from that and focusing on treating employees like people and treating the riders like people who do have a destination to get to and not just customers would be a good step. Also, continuing to denounce any and all of the invasive and unethical techniques and ideas that were proposed by Kalanick. There were quite a few. There was the privacy breach, which used drivers' phones. They were able to spy on whether or not they worked for their top competitor, Lyft. That was definitely a big privacy violation. There was the exchange project that let individuals with low credit that couldn't lease cars like from car companies, let them lease through them. And that ended up with a lot of accidents and ended up costing, I believe it was about $9,000 per person when it was expected to just be about a couple hundred per person. And then the green light hubs, which were implemented in a lot of countries outside of the US, and it gave way to unsafe cars passing inspections really cheap and really quickly. And to do this, they ended up paying off cops. And these safety breaches led to 16 deaths. So that was a big deal. So just continuing to publicly denounce these things and say that they would never, ever do something like that again for the sake of the business, for the sake of growing the company and getting more drivers is a good step. Continuing to address and reimagine the top employees of the business, because a lot of the former employees, like Suzanne Fowler, who have dealt with several forms of harassment, believe that it's the top employees and the top managers in the business that have created the culture that makes women feel unsafe, just in general, a really toxic culture. And hiring more women, because it is significantly less likely for women to speak up in male-dominated spaces. And so to have more women on the board makes it better for everybody. They can speak more, feel more comfortable speaking, and in general, have more people that they can trust. Firing problematic and dangerous managers rather than relocating them away from those that were willing to make reports of abuse. There were multiple cases where someone would be reported, and instead of that person being fired or actually facing any disciplinary action, they would just be moved to a different department or a different store to essentially start fresh. And a good step for this would be to dismantle those managers that abuse their powers rather than upholding them, because Kalanick was known to give platforms to the higher up employees like Uber Senior Vice President Emil Michael, who stepped in before Francis Frey did. And he was a man that was involved in invading the private lives of journalists. And Kalanick brought him in front of an entire Vegas meeting, which was very, very large, and said that he represented one of the 14 company core values. So maybe not give people like that platforms quite as much as they used to. And then the last thing is to instill a shared purpose, taking political stands and proving to the company, your employees, and to the customers that you do have a conscience and you do have ethics and you do have values, but also avoid taking political stands only when necessary against competitors, because Uber has in the past been seen to step in and donate to companies, or not companies, to charities right after their competitor does something bad. So to take a more consistent stand with activism would be a great idea. And this shared purpose amongst Uber drivers and their riders can increase the trust between them, build stronger bonds, which in turn gives you a stronger culture and community. So to sum up, by implementing these steps, the culture that is intertwined in Uber and has lacked so much over the last decade can be rebuilt. And in doing this, customers and employees alike can feel more connected and comfortable with the business, and growth can be found here, as well as a stronger reputation, which will prove that a business with a once dwindling hold on the market can bounce back if values and ethics are upheld.